John, how important is originality to you?
I think it depends, Peter, what you mean by originality. If you mean originality going back to origins, then it's all important to me. But if it's connected with the sort of originality that means shocking an audience or doing something that's sort of novel, I'm not remotely interested in it, because I feel that originality is connected with the origin of music, and in a sense the only person who can make things new is Christ, who said, "Behold, I make all things new." I mean, we are just a vehicle through which God or the Holy Spirit works.
Orthodoxy is not innovation. Orthodoxy is eternally new. I think there is a story in the writings of Hermas, one of the early disciples of Christ. He sees in a vision a woman with white hair and the face of a virgin, and he says, "But who are you?" And she says, "I am the church. I have the white hair of wisdom and the eternal youth of maidenhead." And I think this is how I perceive Orthodoxy.
The challenge John faces is to express this tradition in an English context. Stephen Darlington is the choirmaster and conductor at Christ Church. They will discuss the new piece John has written for his choir.
I used to think, damn it, I'd rather conduct everything myself, because I know how it's supposed to go. But the years have sort of taught me that very often conductors can reveal something in the music which I'd not thought of myself.
I've had a chance, obviously, to look through the score, and I think I've got a general impression of it, but perhaps you could start by actually telling me a bit about it yourself.
Well, it falls into a number of sections. The opening section, which is "Come and abide in us," and that was the first idea I had, that idea of the descending fifth. And then the melody for "We Magnify Thee." Then even the melody itself is magnified. And for the third time it's magnified even more with the sopranos going in.
Can I just ask you about the first time it's sung there with just the tenors and basses, and you've marked strong in the score? I don't usually get the chance to talk to composers in such detail.
Not really, no.
There are many things about his style which are a little unfamiliar to me. He wrote a piece for the choir last year, so I know something about it, and he has at least worked with the choir before. But I'm hoping that I'm going to glean a lot of information from today's meeting, which is going to help me in training the choir, teaching the choir his music. I only hope we're up to it.
I'm sure we are.
What's special about being a chorister at Christ Church is that, as well as having to sing in the cathedral choir, each boy has to learn 2 instruments. And this gives them a terrific opportunity to play music in a wide variety of styles.
I think it's a marvellous thing that very young people are so versatile and they don't have any preconceived notions about what music is. Whether it be jazz, whether it be boogie-woogie, whatever it is, there's a tremendous receptivity which I'm afraid starts to go the older they get.
The receptivity of Christ Church's Anglican choristers will certainly be tested by John Tavener's orthodox, Hymn to the Holy Spirit, as it brings magnificently together these two great choral traditions.
This is the first time that John's heard his piece, so we're naturally all rather apprehensive about whether we're really meeting his expectations or not.
Well, I wonder, because it's an invocation to the Holy Spirit, and you can't make a sort of intellectual demand on the Holy Spirit to come and abide in us, that it shouldn't be just a little more gentle. Come and abide in us. A little softer.
Right.
Maybe.
Okay. Well, so boys, it's mezzo piano, no louder at the start. Okay. Once more.
I just love the sound of the human voice, whether it be male or female, and whether they be singing together in the chorus or whether they be singing solo. I must have written perhaps nearly 100 works now, and I would say perhaps 80% of them, if not 90%, were either choral or vocal. So I would say my first love is the human voice.
Is that more what you had in mind?
It's much better. Much better.
Why don't we now go on to the next section then and see what you make of that? Okay.
The nature of the relationship between a composer and a conductor is really quite a complex one. On the one hand, John has his own view of how his piece should be sung. He's got an ideal view of what the piece is about. My job is to try and put that into practice. Obviously, I'm rather more conscious of the technical limitations of the group that I have, particular sounds that the boys are capable of making at certain pitches, or the sounds that the basses are capable of making on very low notes. The object of the exercise is to pull these two strands together so that we're arriving at the performance which will really express the essence of what John's piece is about. And maybe there'll be some aspects of the music which I and the choir have been able to discover which might complement what John had originally in his mind when he was writing it.
John Tavener has a family connection with this college that goes back to the 16th century. This is another John Tavener, John's ancestor. He wrote for the newly founded Christchurch choir when England was still a Catholic country. With the Reformation, they say he gave up composing and turned with zeal to the persecution of priests, leaving plain song, that beautiful Latin chant, behind him.
Tavener, the great 16th century Tavener, was perhaps the last Western composer who really belonged to a sacred tradition where chant really guided every line, every contour of his music.
Would you say that chant, that droning, wonderful, bee-like noise that you make the choirs make, is important to the sacredness of this tradition?
Totally. I think that once both chant and, the Greek word ison, which means drone, which is on the bagpipe to which you refer, once you take out the drone and once you take out chant, then you're already cutting the umbilical cord, between the heavenly and the earthly. I think it's a nonsense for composers to think that they can do their own thing outside tradition, or try and copy it even. There's even worse. You have to boldly take hold of the chant and use it, because in a sense only God can create, and his creatures are there to use the chant that's been planted there right from the beginning of time.
As an Anglican cathedral choir, we're very used to singing music by John's ancestor, which is firmly rooted in the Catholic plainsong tradition. But here we are also singing music which is firmly rooted in the tradition of chanting, which is requiring a very different sound, the kind of sound which John describes as being incarnate, a very physical sound.
Some weeks have now passed. Stephen Darlington has had the opportunity to rehearse his choir and train them to John's very exacting requirements.
I'm very thrilled with the sound of this middle section. I think I like this section most in the whole piece, and making a, I think, superb sound, and the phrasing has come on tremendously from the first rehearsal. And I think the three solo boys are absolutely superb, and one can hear every single word.
Relax. Fine.
That's fine. The comes perhaps can be they're a bit awfully beautiful, and I hesitate to say much anything about them, but each time you reiterate the new, it goes come. Can you make it? There's a marvelous phrase in St. Simeon the New Theologian in a poem where he's talking to the Holy Spirit, and he says, "Come, you who are alone, to me who am utterly alone." So it's something more sort of pleading with the word "come." Every time it comes, come.
It seems very appropriate to have a hymn to the Holy Spirit, because it can only be the Holy Spirit who has brought him to this point and who will help him for the future. And so the invocation, come to the Holy Spirit, is in fact John's own prayer and the prayer of any of us who love him.
His problem is a very, very difficult one, because he is an English composer. He works within an English tradition, and to produce the kind of music he wants to produce, he has to find his roots within the tradition of liturgical music of the Orthodox Church. There's no other way he can do this. And to do that, and also to transpose it into a Western context, is a problem that's so daunting that you might almost say that it's an impossible thing to do.
It would be if he were approaching it for his own grandisement. But without sounding patronizing, I would say that John has one of the most humble souls I have had the joy to meet. Therefore, the task is not impossible, because he wants to serve. He doesn't want to gain glory by what he does.
To change, I would dearly love to be able to write as a sort of small-time Bach for this cathedral, for instance,
yes.
and to begin, only to begin, because that's all I could do in my lifetime, to begin to forge an English Orthodox tradition.
This is a historic moment both for John Tavener and for the choir of Christchurch. They will sing in an Orthodox cathedral for the first time. Their performance of the hymn to the Holy Spirit fulfills, however briefly, John's dream of an English Orthodoxy.
I feel that today has brought me just fractionally nearer to that ambition or dream. If I could be employed composing settings of all the Orthodox services, I would be a very happy man. Your Eminence, Despota, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, it has struck me, as it may you, what a surprising and delightful meeting the Holy Spirit, as it were, has arranged for us.
I do believe that one can touch the hem of the divine even without knowing it. And this is where I believe beauty may play a very important role. Every work of art, whether it is icon, music, is meant to convey a message. And this message cannot reach people unless they can respond to it by saying, how beautiful. And I think it is a very important thing that the whole world is a revelation of beauty, and beyond or behind this beauty, there is the supreme beauty of God.
I can see that the task is gigantic. But if one forgets all that and remembers that the apostles were told to go and preach to all the world, a miserable, wretched, lonely little group of men, half illiterate, and they did, then no task is impossible, and therefore John's task is not impossible.
John Tavener has found his home in Orthodoxy, and I find it natural in the sense that for me Orthodoxy is a fullness, is a plenitude, and I think that in his search for a musical fullness and for a faith that could truly fill his soul and mind, Orthodoxy was the answer.